A map of conferences that once looked like this, now looks like this. So how did we get here? What happened? The short answer is money. The long answer involves the Supreme Court, the Pentagon, and Bristol, Connecticut. This is how conferences spread coast to coast, the full conference realignment story.
Conference realignment.
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 Conference realignment. Conference realignment.
Conference realignment.
Conference realignment.
Conference realignment. It's a constant topic of discussion in college sports, and for good reason. We take you back to 1852. A rowing event between Harvard and Yale is the first intercollegiate sporting event in the United States. 17 years later, Rutgers defeated Princeton 6-4 in what is considered the first intercollegiate football game. 19 years after that, the first athletic conference was formed. James Heckman from Hillsdale College in Michigan had the idea to form a permanent league between schools. He met with delegates from other Michigan schools to form the Michigan Intercollegiate Athletic Association for the 1888-89 year. Over the next 20 or so years, several other conferences would be created, most notably the Intercollegiate Conference of Faculty Representatives, also known at the time as the Western Conference, and now known as the Big Ten. It was in 1906 the NCAA was formed under the name Intercollegiate Athletic Association of the United States. The majority of conferences at this time were typically 4 to 10 schools and extremely regionalized. A year later, the Missouri Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Association was formed. In 1914, the Southwest Conference was founded, and in 1915 came the Pacific Coast Conference. The anomaly at the time was the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Association, which had 28 members before 14 split off in 1921 to create their own conference. 6 more schools joined the next year, pushing the membership back to an untenable size. The MVIAA would thrust collegiate athletics into a new era in 1928 when the 6 bigger schools split off to form their own conference. The new conference of only the most desirable members was nicknamed the Big Six. Following their lead, 13 members left the Southern Conference in 1932 to create the Southeastern Conference. It was this new SEC that would bring the next innovation to college athletics 3 years later when they became the first conference to legalize athletic scholarships. It wasn't until after the war that there was another major development in college athletics, and it's not what you may think. In 1951, a coaxial cable was extended to the West Coast, allowing transcontinental broadcasting for the first time. Perhaps college football purists could say this was the beginning of the end. The number of families with television access was growing exponentially from less than 1% in 1948 to 32% of households in 1952. 2 schools at this time had individual contracts with television networks to broadcast their games regionally. Concerned about this development, the NCAA commissioned a study to look into the effect of televising games on attendance. Their main conclusion was that televised games decreased the attendance for programs that were not appearing on TV. As a result, they created the Football Television Committee in 1953 to begin to regulate college football on TV. Their rules were 1 game on TV per weekend, and each school could only appear on TV 1 time per season. The revenue would be shared only by the teams that appear on television. They sold the exclusive rights to broadcast the weekly games to NBC for just over $1 million. Notre Dame and ABC worked around these rules by broadcasting their games on tape delay. Penn, on the other hand, did not acquiesce so easily. They tried to proceed with their plans to televise all their games, and in response, the NCAA barred all teams from playing against them. Trying to get more matchups selected for TV, the remaining large members of the Southern Conference broke off to form the Atlantic Coast Conference in 1953. A few years later on the Pacific Coast, Washington, Cal, UCLA, and USC were all found to have been paying players in 1956. In the fallout, the conference was dissolved in 1959. At this time, another invention was at the precipice of changing the landscape of college athletics forever. Pitt AD Tom Hamilton proposed a super conference that was nicknamed the Airplane Conference. Jet airplane accessibility had made it possible to share a conference with schools located much further away than ever before. The proposed 12-team conference consisted of 5 former PCC schools, the 3 service academies, Notre Dame, Pitt, Syracuse, and Penn State. The 12 considered themselves like-minded as football and academic powerhouses. Proponents said that it would have been the strongest football conference in the country. All signs pointed toward the creation of this new superconference until it hit a snag from an unlikely source. The idea was ultimately shot down because the Pentagon did not want the service academies participating. The idea of a college football superconference was dead. For now. Instead, the AAWU was quickly formed as a replacement, with all PCC members rejoining over the next several years except for Idaho, who had become non-competitive. The FTC brought stability to college football for over 2 decades, with only minor conference changes occurring during this time. That was until 1977, when 63 major programs banded together to fight against the NCAA and the FTC. They formed a group called the College Football Association to negotiate their own TV deals. The CFA argued that the rules in place by the FTC were obstructing their ability to grow and earn money. Shortly after, a cable channel was launched with the name ESPN. The fledgling cable network did not have the funds to bid on college football, so there was no initial impact. In 1981, the CFA had finally negotiated its TV deal for the member schools. In response, the NCAA threatened sanctions against all CFA schools in every sport, not just football. Steadfast in their belief for the future of college football, the universities of Georgia and Oklahoma sought an injunction in U.S. District Court. Their assertion was that the NCAA was engaging in restraint of trade and price fixing. The lower court ruled in Oklahoma's favor. The NCAA appealed. The Court of Appeals rejected the NCAA's argument, so the NCAA appealed. By 1984, the case had reached the U.S. Supreme Court. Justice John Paul Stevens delivered the majority opinion, stating flatly, "There can be no doubt the challenged practices of the NCAA constitute a restraint of trade." With this ruling, the courts declared that the NCAA did not have grounds to restrict its member schools from negotiating TV deals. That same year, the fledgling cable sports network was given a significant boost when they were purchased by ABC. There were no major developments immediately following these events for a few years. In February of 1990, Notre Dame turned its back on its CFA brethren and signed a deal with NBC for $7.6 million a year starting with the '91 season. This move certainly put the members of the CFA on high alert. In August of that year, a conference move was announced. A very strange move. You'd really have to be a college football junkie to even know what I'm talking about. Arkansas was leaving the Southwest Conference for the SEC, and football independent South Carolina joined the following month. It was at this time that other school executives started to ask, why would the SEC do that? What's going on in Birmingham? As it turns out, the SEC was attempting to bolster its position to negotiate an independent television contract. This began an arms race among major conferences. For the next few years, and here's a sentence they'll love to hear, the college football world revolved around the Texas Longhorns. But not on the field. The Pac-10 wanted to bring in Colorado and Texas. Texas and Texas A&M wanted to squeeze into the SEC. The Big East added several prominent independents and started to sponsor football. The ACC added Florida State. The Big Ten, which had added Penn State a few years earlier in 1990, discussed adding Kansas, Missouri, and Rutgers. By 1994, the Big Eight and the Southwest Conference had not yet made any moves. The Southwest Conference may have been on its last legs. With SMU's death penalty in 1987 and subsequent probation, the Southwest Conference was beginning to fail. Arkansas leaving may be the nail in the coffin. It was later revealed that the hammer for this nail was Texas and Texas A&M leaders who were looking to destabilize the conference to set up their own eventual move. Politicians had previously threatened the Texas schools' funding when word had leaked that they were looking to move to the SEC, but with a dissolved conference they may be more lenient. In February of 1994, the SEC officially announced their intention to leave the College Football Association, signaling the inevitable end of the CFA as a relevant entity in college football. Immediately, the Big Eight and Southwest knew a move had to be made. Working alongside our old friends in Bristol, Connecticut, they began to negotiate an alliance. Texas had their eyes on the Pac-10, and Texas A&M had their eyes on the SEC. The Big Eight didn't like these wandering eyes and decided maybe they'd be better off without them. Local Texas politicians were worried that the two biggest programs were going to leave the other local schools to fall behind. With this internal pressure, it was Texas that came running back to the Big Eight. Within a day, the Big Eight extended invitations to the 4 larger Texas schools, which were immediately accepted. The two conferences merged to create a brand new conference named the Big 12. After that, all remained quiet for another 15 years except for a small shuffle with the Big East and ACC, which had slightly weakened the Big East's football position. Shockwaves were again sent out in December of 2009 when the Big Ten announced they were exploring expansion. Motives were expanding the reach and programming of their conference cable channel and hosting a conference championship which required 12 schools at the time. The Pac-10 followed suit shortly after announcing their own intentions to expand. They ended up being the first mover, issuing invitations to 6 Big 12 schools on June 7, 2010. After 3 days, it was officially announced that Colorado would join the Pac in 2012, with rumors that the other 5 schools would join them in the coming days. Sensing the instability in the Big 12, Nebraska accepted an invitation to the Big 10 a day later. After a few more days, Pac-10 Commissioner Larry Scott announced that Texas had rejected the offer. Texas and the other Big 12 schools reaffirmed their commitment to the Big 12. The Pac-10 was able to regroup and added Utah to get the conference to 12 members. In January of 2011, the first team-specific cable channel, the Longhorn Network, was announced. This was a joint venture between ESPN and the University of Texas. Other Big 12 members and fans were infuriated by this, as it was seen their primary media partner was favoring one member over the rest. While Texas A&M was already leaning toward joining the SEC, an idea they had been toying with for decades, school leaders credit the Longhorn Network with pushing the fan sentiment over the edge. They announced their move in the summer of 2011, with Mizzou joining them in the fall. Down to 8 members, the Big 12 scrambled to add West Virginia from the Big East and TCU from the Mountain West to stabilize in the short term. In late 2012, the Big Ten decided they were not yet satiated. It was reported they were in serious negotiations with Maryland. Maryland and partner Rutgers were announced as the newest Big Ten members shortly after. For many, this indicated a clear new direction for college athletics. Neither Rutgers nor Maryland brought a premier athletic program with them, so why would the Big Ten target these schools? The answer was television markets. Maryland brought the DC area to Big Ten country, while Rutgers brought in the lucrative New York City market. The ACC also backfilled from the Big East, adding Pitt, Syracuse, Louisville, and non-football member Notre Dame. This left the Big East with just 10 members, 7 of which were non-football members. The 7, known as the Catholic 7, announced their intention of creating a non-football conference which would continue to be known as the Big East. The FBS members were able to salvage it a little bit with the creation of the American Athletic Conference, but the Power 6 had officially become the Power 5. For the better part of a decade, all was stable again. But TV contracts, they have an end date, and when that end date nears, everyone explores how the next one can be the most lucrative deal yet. A bombshell was dropped by the Houston Chronicle on July 21, 2021. Red River rivals and recurring realignment characters Oklahoma and Texas had approached the SEC requesting invitations. Within 10 days, the two were announced as the next additions to the Southeastern Conference. With the Big 12 set to return to 8 members, nicknamed the Hateful Eight, they were again in danger of dissolving. Commissioner Bob Bowlesby worked quickly to add BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF within months. Following Bowlesby's retirement, new Commissioner Brett Yormark chose to extend the grant of rights early, solidifying the conference's footing through 2031. It was down to the Pac-12 and Big Ten to finalize their long-term media agreements. During this time, the Pac-12, Big Ten, and ACC announced their earth-shattering alliance. With 500 miles separating the nearest schools and thousands of miles separating most of them, many fans believed the realignment was over for now. Until it wasn't. Reports came out in June of 2022 that UCLA and USC had asked the Big Ten for an invitation. While many attribute Oklahoma and Texas for plunging conference alignment into absurdity, a strong argument can be made that this was the straw that broke the camel's back. The Big Ten had a long-standing policy that any expansion would be to schools in adjacent states to current members. There's no indication that they would consider the Los Angeles schools for membership had the schools not been the ones to initiate the move. The chaos of conference realignment was back in full swing. Pac-12 Commissioner George Kliavkoff tried to lure UCLA back in by offering an increased payout which angered Oregon, among other schools. ESPN was still interested in dealing with the remaining Pac schools at $30 million a year. Pac-12 analysts had this below their projected $35 million, and one school president was even expecting $50 million. They urged Kliavkoff to counter, and when he did, ESPN walked. Over time, it became increasingly clear they were not going to secure a deal at their original number, and while they were still working to finalize it, Colorado decided they wouldn't wait any longer and bolted for the Big 12. NBC and Amazon were no longer interested in the league and backed away. On August 1st, he had an offer from Apple for a base rate of $23 million a year with incentives for subscriptions. The public sentiment began to change, with many believing that the remaining Pac-9 would stay together, but Washington revealed they were headed to the Big Ten just minutes before a conference meeting to sign the deal. Oregon followed them shortly after, and Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah left for the Big 12 right after that. The Pac-12 was down to the Pac-4. Back on the Atlantic coast, they were facing uncertainty of their own. Many schools had hired legal teams to explore breaking the grant of rights, which was set to extend through 2037. Among the impending emergency, the ACC came in with the most outrageous move yet. On September 1st, 2023, the Atlantic Coast Conference agreed to add SMU, Cal, and Stanford. The two former Pac schools had agreed to a reduced revenue share, while SMU, who was desperate to return to major college football, agreed to take no payments from the conference for 7 years. The Pac-4 was now the Pac-2. In the following years, the Pac and Mountain West wrestled for control of the remaining West Coast teams. In fall 2024, 5 schools announced they would be joining the Pac in 2026, pushing it to 7 members. With Gonzaga later announced as a non-football member, the Pac still needs one more full member to maintain its FBS status. Nearly a year later, Texas State was announced as the 8th full member of the Pac-12. As of June 2025, all power conferences have agreements through at least 2030. With college athletics currently facing changes far greater than a little conference movement, perhaps we will see conference realignment on the back burner for at least a few years. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something.